Welcome back to our Lenten series in our walk with Mary. This is the Immaculate Heart of Mary. There's much devotion in the Church to the Immaculate Heart, the original dwelling place of God, the new Ark of the Covenant. And it's through her Immaculate Heart that we unite with the Sacred Heart of Jesus. You might think of Mary's Immaculate Heart as the first sacramental. A sacramental leads us to the sacraments. So her Immaculate Heart leads us to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. In each of our hearts, there's a special place reserved for God alone. St. Augustine says, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O Lord. So it's through Mary's Immaculate Heart that we unite with Jesus' Sacred Heart. And the very life of God and his heart that we celebrate in the sacraments. There's much said about Mary's heart in the Gospel, especially in Luke chapter 2. Two events in the early life of her son. The birth of Christ, she reflected all these things in her hearts, all the miraculous, divine activity surrounding the birth of her son. As we talked about in this series, the finding at the temple, where Mary pondered things, reflected, and took into her heart all the things that happened, probably realizing at that point, when Jesus was 12 years old, that her child is the Son of God. So we think in her heart, her beautiful and pure heart, that for many, many years, she pondered the activity of God and the signs from him, the promises. And knowing her scripture and knowing tradition, that God always kept his promises. These are things that we normally do on retreats. But Lent is a 40-day retreat. We can think about God's promises throughout history, how he's kept his promises, and the signs he's working in our lives that we've taken to heart and we are reflecting on. To have that faith and hope that Mary did, that he will deliver, that he will keep his promises. She had that firm foundation for many, many years. She was ready for the events of Holy Week, Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and then ultimately the resurrection. She anticipated these things, having pondered them and reflected them in her heart for so long. And she believed that God would save his people as he promised throughout the Old Testament, that he would save his people. And Mary believed, after years of reflection, years of thinking and praying about who her son is, that God would save his people through Jesus. So all the trust and faith we've talked about when she encountered suffering, she had so many years to prepare for. She anticipated not only the cross and the way of the cross, she was ready for that, but also the good that would come from it and all the promises God made, that he would deliver his people, and he would save them through her son. But you and I have the same reflection going into the events of Holy Week, as God has delivered his promises to save his people, and through his son, that he'll do the same for us. May we have the same foundation of hope and faith and trust that Mary had, so when we encounter the cross, we believe firmly that God will save us, as he always has.